Hello viewers, this lecture will be concerned with nature, body, culture. This is the title of the lecture. It is a little unusual kind of lecture, as you would understand, comparing with the other lectures that have been delivered so far. It is because it asks a question which may still appear to be a little peculiar. That question is, can nature and its materiality be a legitimate concern for sociology? Why does this question of a legitimate concern, can it be a legitimate concern? How does it arise, this question? This question arises because when we look back at our classical foundations, we realize what Schelling has called, particularly with regard to the study of the human body, but that can also be extended to the study of nature and its materiality. So what Schelling called the absent presence. So classical sociology and even contemporary sociology, to a good extent, continues to be marked by the absent presence of both nature and the human body. So the question that we began with, can nature and its materiality be a legitimate concern for sociology, is a question that forms part of a long and complex debate that particularly started emerging from around the last 2 decades of the 20th century. Right now, there is an increasingly rich corpus of literature on nature and society, on the body and society, on body, technology and culture, on politics of the body. Still, sociology, to an appreciable extent, continues to be marked by what I have already called, following Schelling, the absent presence of both nature and the human body. Now, why have this interest in nature and human body emerged, even if they have emerged in the social sciences and in sociology only from the last 2 or 3 decades of the last century? Why has it emerged? As we come to the next section, is that causes for the rise of the interest in nature and body. We identify a few. One is environmental degradation. Second is health and inequality. Third is prenatal sex selection, or PSS. Fourth is genomics and technological advances. Fifth is consumer culture. Sixth is feminism. And seventh is changes in governmentality. These are taken from the works of Tim Newton on nature and society and Chris Schilling's books on body culture and technology and body and culture and society, and Brian Turner's books. Let's take the first concern, and that is of environmental degradation. Concerns with changes in the climate, global warming, large-scale and indiscriminate deforestation, loss of biodiversity, pollution, radiation, fears of energy crisis, etc., just to name only a few, have led to an acknowledgement that the, I quote, relationship between human beings and nature remains both contentious and central to human society. Increasing research have proven that inequalities of health are much more a result of the play and interplay of politics around identities of class, caste, ethnicity, race, gender, and sexualities, and medicalized social control than being what is commonsensically believed a result of inherent genetic biological makeup. These help us redraw our understandings of the nature and the social. Coming to the next one, of prenatal sex selection, So PSS is not merely a technological advance, but it has deep implications, more negative, because our societies are marked by patriarchal structures and values. There is the danger that PSS is not merely about consumers' choice, whereby they get the right to choose the sex of their babies. It opens the door for female feticide, backstreet forced abortion, where feticide is not possible, and the dominance of free market eugenics that allows the consumers to go for implantation of human embryos with desirable characteristics. I'm in particular a little more concerned with this kind of possibility of bringing and developing humans with desirable characteristics, giving birth to such humans. It immediately brings to my mind, and we may remind ourselves of the Nazi biomedical vision that was marked by eugenics that led to the wiping off of millions of people considered unworthy of life, and also to horrifying blood-curdling experiments with the bodies of those unworthy beings. You would probably be able to recall the most infamous doctor of Auschwitz, known as Dr. Death, Dr. Joseph Mengele, and his experiments particularly with twins, with children. Related to this previous discussion, advances in transplant surgery, in vitro fertilization, and genetic engineering increased control over bodies but instituted a weakening of the boundaries between bodies and machines that prompted some to reconceptualize humans as cyborgs. While the Human Genome Project makes the human body, once thought unchangeable by external technological interventions, malleable to technology, such technological advances have led to uncertainty about the knowledge of our bodies. The feelings about our bodies have been undermined. Consumer culture has given rise to the commercialized body. It became increasingly associated with people's sense of self-identity. Consumer culture has seen a distinct shift in the ways people started identifying their bodies with. Earlier, in the early phase of capitalist production, the focus was on hard work and frugality of consumption. But with new advanced capitalism, it is now hard work combined with hedonistic consumption. So the Calvinist ethic, the Protestant ethic that Weber wrote about, which focused on hard work and frugality of consumption, those days are gone. Because with advanced capitalism, the new combination is hard work, absolutely essential, but along with it is hedonistic consumption. Advertisements are a good proof of this shift. If you look at billboards, advertisements anywhere, you will definitely be able to mark this shift. Work culture is no longer only about efficiency and productivity, teamwork, maintaining cordial relations with colleagues and management. It is also significantly about body work, making your body presentable along with being efficient and productive. These shifts have been analyzed by the theorists of consumer culture through the concepts of Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, taken from Tönnies, Ferdinand Tönnies, and mechanical and organic solidarity of Emil Durkheim. Such research, I quote, suggested that the body was increasingly on show as the vehicle of consumption, and that social status was linked to the visible exteriors of the physical self. This emergence of a topographical approach to the flesh as appearance was seen as emptying the body of its traditional Christian significance as a container of sin and promoting it as a form of physical capital. We come to the point on feminism. How has feminism contributed to this emergence and centrality of the human body? Feminism, particularly radical feminism, associated with the second wave of feminist movement, contested the sex gender, so the biological sex and cultural gender divide, and argued with conviction that there was nothing natural with women's corporeality that justified their subordination in public. Feminism highlighted the way the female body was used as a means of discriminating against women. There was nothing natural about women's association with the domestic sphere. It is the patriarchal understanding, value systems, and structures that hold women to be more biological, more corporeal, and more natural than men, and therefore more suited to the world of private than public existence. This feminist challenge has been critical in marking this shift. Governmentality, particularly the changes in governmentality. Michel Foucault was the pioneer in theories of governmentality. He showed that human physicality became an object of control, and control took various forms. Modern human was marked by a shift in the targets of governmentality. From the fleshy body that was the object of control prior to modernity, with modernity, the object of control was now the mind or the mindful body. In the object of discourse, concerns of life and particularly death are now replaced by the questions of how to structure life. And in the scope of discourse of governmentality, the control, the aspect that was very marked earlier was the control of anonymous individuals. That shifted onto the managing of differentiated population, because with modernity, you do not have these homogeneous sets of blocks. It's a heterogeneity. So different kinds of people are living together in a common space, mostly. So how do we then manage this differentiated population? That has now become the scope of the discourse of governmentality. So all these were responsible for this rise in interest about both the human body and the role of nature. So because the concern was about redefining human relationship to nature, and that also placed at its center the human body. The question now is, how do we claim in sociology that we have a right to study this? So we go back to the classical foundations, where we talked about an absent presence of both nature and body. Let us look at that. Tim Newton says that human biology can eschew sociological attention because it is such a routine aspect of everyday life. Though we are entirely dependent on our bodies, he says we tend to forget that, quote, without this body, without this tongue or these ears, you could neither speak nor hear another's voice. So what we have taken for granted, the human body, and we don't need to study it, right? Because what is there to study about it? It's so taken for granted. That needs to be re-examined. That needs to be revisited. So the relation between human biology and sociality therefore needs to be re-examined. For instance, when we tend to overlook everyday aspects of our biological selves, such as the significance of the human hand, let us see what Tim Newton writes, quoting from Bendelow and Williams. The human hand is a remarkable feat of evolutionary engineering, a single tool which manipulates an astonishing variety of objects of different shapes, weights, and sizes, each of which needs a precise combination of muscle tensions that mold it into the right shape for the right task. Let us take the case of the pen. Right? And now let us take the case of this pen stand. Without our hands being flexible enough, it's a biological thing, purely biological thing, that allows us to maneuver, that allows us certain kinds of muscle tensions that would be required for handling certain kinds of objects, is again overlooked. Ian Burkitt argues that tools are also critical to human communication and evolution, and they represent artifacts with a symbolic significance as reflected in the intricacy of distinctive human activities such as writing, painting, designing, carving, sewing, cooking, so on. Yet, in spite of the social significance of our hands and the tools they manipulate, they can be so quotidian, so everyday, so mundane that we fail to recognize them. Without the hand, how are we going to become workers and produce what we have been producing? But this has been neglected. The very corporeality of our existence has been neglected because in its urge to be able to study something that was not studied by any discipline, the social, the focus shifted away from nature to culture for sociology. But the time has come to perhaps bridge this divide as much as possible, to give nature and materiality its due. Smile. Take the case of the smile. The smile remains an extra discursive aspect of our biology, yet one that is central to social discourse. It is a leading actor in our non-verbal repertoire and one that enables considerable communicative subtlety and a rich variety of shades of feelings. From Ilias, he says, the smile can be a hesitant, a withdrawn, a broad, a triumphant, a supercilious, and even a hostile smile. Sociality would not have been possible without that. Language would not have been possible. Language, the tool for our communication, would not have been possible without the biological endowment of these natural organs. So there has been, therefore, it is there, the presence of nature, and yet again, it is not considered important enough for sociology to theorize about nature. Newton says that the oft-repeated Ellisian quotation shows how human biology is not just a matter of physiological functioning or the psychology of interpersonal communication. It is also a means by which we play out power relations. Ilias's attention to this machinery of power reminds us how smiling, like other bodily repertoires, forms part of a complex of human emotions that resonates simultaneously through both our bodies and our culture. On the one hand, our emotions are interwoven with our culture as revealed in the variance of emotional vocabulary across cultures. On the other hand, emotion is a biologically embodied experience. Now let us move on to the question of the human body. What do we gain by looking at how classical thinkers looked or studied the human body? What was the place, let's say, of the biological body in the works of classical thinkers such as Durkheim, Marx, Weber, or Simmel? So Schilling says that one can identify three elements in their views of the body. With regard to Marx, Durkheim, and Simmel, he says that each suggests that the body possesses properties that are a source for the creation of social life. So from this, we can take from this idea that the body is a source of society, is that the embodied subject is possessed of an intentional capacity for making a difference to the flow of daily life and of socially creative capacities resulting from its sensory and mobile character, which are not always directly accessible to individual consciousness. Therefore, the body as a source of society, there is a causal link traveling from basic human capacities towards social structures that sometimes operates irrespective of the conscious intent and thought of the subject. Second, the body also serves in part as a location for the structural properties of society. So Marx focuses on the structural properties of the economy, Durkheim on the structural properties of cultures, and Simmel on the structural properties that are social forms, yet they each examine how these structures locate themselves on the bodies of their subjects. Let us see then what is the third point: analytical convergence between Durkheim, Simmel, and Marx. So that third element involves their acknowledgement that interaction between the body's generative capacities and the existing structures of society has important consequences for the subsequent development of both human potential and the social environment. If we focus on the body as a source for society, we can see, with example drawing from Marx, that what does Marx say? That hunger is the acknowledged need of the body for an external object and also propels people in combining with others in order to produce their means of subsistence. In terms of the human ability to develop the world, the idea that people engage practically with their environment through labor, you see, human beings are considered to be homo faber, that is, they labor. So Marx and Engels have a small tract that says that the transformation from ape to man, the role of labor in the transformation from ape to man. So labor and the ability to labor emerges from where? From the very biological body of the humans. Our bodies may be part of nature, but also actively oppose themselves to nature by setting in motion arms and legs, hands and forces, the natural forces of the body, in order to provide for their natural and social needs. So, although the body is a natural one. It must place itself in opposition to that, to create, to produce, both to serve their needs, their natural needs, and also to serve the needs which are social. So according to Engels, Schilling shows that it is the hand as the organ of labor that is of utmost importance to the development of environment. The productive capacities of the hand emerge through its ability to invent and increasingly manipulate complex tools, while its gestural use is key to the cultivation of social relationships. It is the highly complex embodied properties of humans as a whole that predispose them towards a productive relationship with the environment, equipping individuals with the powers of intentional practical activity that unites the labor of the hand with that of the head. And it is this practical embodied consciousness that distinguishes humans from other animals. Imparting labor, Schilling continues, and the social relationships surrounding it with an ever-renewed impulse to further development and ensuring that social actors possess the capacity to actively create and not just be passive recipients of society. Durkheim also viewed the social and natural worlds as complementary, analyzed the body as an essential source of society. Durkheim expresses this is particularly the case when he studies religion. So Durkheim expresses this creativity in his argument that the body conceals in its depth a sacred principle that erupts onto the surface in particular circumstances. The body is again that source of the social. When Durkheim studied the division of labor and the move from mechanical to organic solidarity through penal laws, where did the laws operate? On the human body, the individual body, the collective body, and all these are infused with a kind of moral individualism. If we look at, for instance, Weber and his study of the Protestant ethic, what is the body like in the Christian worldview, in the Protestant worldview? It is, as we have pointed out when we are talking about the shifts that have occurred, that gave rise to the study of body as an important arena in the social sciences. So the point on consumer culture. So earlier it was considered as a container of sin, and the Protestant ethic does elaborate on that when it forbids any kind of excessive consumption that will satisfy different kinds of needs of the flesh except those that is absolutely necessary. Frugal consumption is centered around the human body, the biological body. To move on to Simmel, let's say, Simmel's primary concern being with social interaction rather than the economic foundations or symbolic order of society, Schilling says that he still conceptualizes, despite this, he still conceptualizes the body as a productive source of those social and cultural forms in which interaction and sociality occur. Like Marx and Durkheim, and this is because, as Schilling says, Simmel recognizes the body as being possessed of generative properties that make it a corporeal basis for society. So, Schilling continues that specifically the embodied individual is characterized by drives, dispositions and purposes, which include erotic, religious, and aggressive impulses, and motives of gain, defense, attack, and instruction. So, can we, considering that we have the classical foundations there for a study of body and nature and its materiality, is it possible to bridge the divide and give nature its materiality and the human body its due? So far we have discussed it from Schelling, quoting from Schelling and explaining parts of it. We get back to Newton with that question as to whether we can actually cross the divide, the great divide between nature and culture. So he brings in a dialogue two contrasting schools. One is the actor network theory, and the other is the strong program of known as the Edinburgh School. So actor network theory, whose most important protagonist is Bruno Latour. Actor network theory talks about co-production of the cultural world. And he argues that, the actor network theory, that both nature and culture have a role in the production of the meanings of culture. And that nature itself has its own agency, which theorists of culture, and in this case they are referring to the strong program, do not accept. However, the strong program points out that there may be something out there, as that nature is something out there, but we can only know nature through the intervention of a knowing subject. So the subject-object distinction makes the strong program come up with the statement that, and the belief that, it is impossible for the knowing subject to completely rid themselves of cultural values, and therefore we cannot have an understanding of nature that is unmediated, an understanding of nature as it is out there. They further argue that nature does not have the same agency as humans have, as cultural beings they have, and that scientific facts are often more readily acceptable when they do not really challenge the local cultural value systems. And therefore, while it is important that we try and bring together with our own analysis of culture the role that nature itself plays, it may become little difficult to demand that the divide be done away with. There is also another danger associated with the call to bring back nature, because it can again justify inequalities based on race, on gender, on caste, on class, on ethnicity, on sexualities, and all these kinds of identities. Justify those inequalities as having come from nature. This is particularly a concern that feminists have forwarded. That's all for us. Thank you.